Hello fellow YouTube surfers, welcome back to Cineforce. I'm Liam and this is still our home for everything geeky, nerdy, and pop culture related. We have been taking a bit of a break while dealing with everything related to the COVID-19 situation, but we hope you are all staying safe, making the right decisions, and just being kind to one another. There is obviously a lot of political and social tension happening right now, which is going on for very legitimate reasons. And we hope that everybody that's out there protesting for positive change in the world right now is doing so in a safe way, a non-violent way, and that you and your families are safe at the moment. And we do continue to hope that the world can regain some form of peace and sanity in the near future. We don't want to make light of all the serious things that are going on in the world right now, but we do hope that us talking about some goofy pop culture nonsense can help take some of your minds off of some of the more depressing things that are going on right now, and at least be a way to give temporary focus to some things that we all enjoy. As several businesses do start to reopen, we would like to say to just please continue to be smart and be safe, and do your best to not let all the hate and negativity that's going on right now take you down. Having said all that, we are going to talk a little bit about how coronavirus has affected the entertainment industry and our channel, but we do want to focus on the positive where we can. A couple weeks ago, we were going to launch our satire news show Matters of the Universe. However, given the course of events lately, we've decided to push back the first episode of that until later in the month. We will be putting up the first episode of our show Couples Car Reading later in the week, as well as the first episode in our Alterverse series of videos, which will explore some various styles of alternate universe type concepts based on some of our favorite franchises. We're going to start that concept off with an episode of our show focused on restructuring the Star Wars films, the first of which will focus primarily on the prequel movies and in particular Star Wars Episode 1. We're also working on the first couple episodes of our Boston Movie Breakdown series, and you'll see the first one of those show up very soon. If that concept goes over well, we'll end up doing more of those as an ongoing series, and we also hope to get started on some animation projects in the near future. So anyway, that's everything that we're currently working on here at the channel. But seeing as none of that is finished right now, we wanted to take another look at what's been going on in movie news since our last episode, and it's kind of been a lot. The unexpected impact of coronavirus has shifted a lot of things in the entertainment world around. Due to social distancing and quarantines, we not only have seen a stop to sporting events and concerts, theater, but TV and movie sets over the past few months have seen a massive halt in production, and this is having ripple effects on all aspects of an industry that usually never sleeps. Several movies that were already completed have been pushed back from release dates in the spring and summer, such as Marvel's Black Widow, Disney's Mulan, the sequels to Quiet Place and Top Gun, the prequel to Kingsman, Godzilla vs. King Kong, and Wonder Woman 1984, which had already had several release date changes before and had been originally set to come out this past November. Several other movies that were going to come out later this year that we did talk about in our last episode have been pushed back to 2021, and this includes the 9th Fast and Furious movie, the new Ghostbusters movie, Marvel's Eternals, and the Sony Spider-Man spin-offs of Morbius and Venom 2. Beyond that, companies like Marvel have had to push several other film releases that were slated to come out over the next couple years, though it does look like most productions are set to start back up again soon, while still following COVID prevention guidelines. This doesn't mean that the industry is out of the woods yet, as the theater business itself still faces the process of reopening to the public, and several arguments have already been had over some films going straight to video on demand, such as Universal's Trolls 2, which ended up causing a controversy because AMC and several other theaters said that because they went straight to on demand, that they would block any other Universal films from playing in their theaters, which I think is a massively bad decision for AMC in particular, who is already in trouble. For those of you who don't know, AMC Theaters, who we ourselves gave a big shout out to in our last podcast, is facing a lot of financial trouble right now, and despite being the biggest theater chain in the country, is now facing bankruptcy. As movie lovers and people who love AMC in general, we do hope that this outcome can be averted, but there is talk of somebody else buying AMC, perhaps even someone like Disney. Now, there are some big questions about the ethics behind if something like that were to happen, and there are obviously some very dangerous implications of all of this, but we do hope that the theater experience can continue because as movie lovers it is a big deal. Though even movie lovers like us are very hesitant to rush back out to the cinema as things open back up, and every day that this crisis continues definitely has a big impact on the world of movies, both financially and socially. So that is all the bad news. There has been some good news for nerds lately, however, as it was finally confirmed a couple weeks ago that Warner Brothers will be using their new HBO Max streaming service as a release platform for Zack Snyder's director's cut of the movie Justice League. The Snyder cut of this film has been something that DC fans have been asking for since the original theatrical release over 2 years ago, and it is promised to be vastly different from the film seen in theaters. If you weren't already aware, Zack Snyder directed Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman and was originally directing Justice League, but left the movie before it was completed due to a family tragedy. They ended up bringing the director Joss Whedon in to finish the film, reportedly reshooting a huge percentage of it and resulting in a finished product that was largely different from the original plan. Many fans complained that this gave the film an uneven and problematic Frankenstein-like nature, and the problems behind the scenes put a stop to the plans of the movie being the first of a 2 or even possibly 3-part saga, if you believe some reports. News of the studio giving the director a platform and a multi-million-dollar extensive budget to complete his version of the film is an unprecedented move that does make a lot of sense, as Snyder and the cast have repeatedly claimed for a long time that a version of his cut does exist, and it is sure to draw a lot of eyes onto the new HBO Max streaming service for Warner Brothers. But in general, it'll be fascinating just to see how different the movie is compared to the Justice League that came out in 2017. The movie had high anticipation but extremely mixed reviews, along with plenty of controversy over things such as the studio choosing to digitally remove the mustache that Henry Cavill had grown for Mission Impossible 6, just to be able to make their original release date instead of postponing reshoots. That could prove to be a small issue depending on what kind of footage we see get put back into the film, as there were reportedly several huge differences in plot and character usage, and aside from definitely getting to see an appearance from the major DC villain Darkseid, we could also potentially see the inclusion of fan-favorite characters such as Green Lantern and Martian Manhunter, as well as more backstory for characters like Cyborg and the Flash. Time will tell, but no matter how things turn out, this story was a huge bombshell for the fan community. Zack Snyder is reportedly getting somewhere over $30 million to finish his version of the movie, which is unheard of as far as director's cuts go, but should prove to be a very interesting experiment should the Zack Snyder Justice League prove to be a success, especially since it isn't getting any sort of theatrical release or home video release, at least that we know of, and is only being released through the HBO Max streaming service. All of this has also prompted many fans to ask whether we might see a director's cut of David Ayer's Suicide Squad come to the streaming service at some point, and I have to say I think it would be a good move on the studio's part to move forward on that as well. Suicide Squad did make a lot of money when it came out, but a lot of fans had many issues with the way the movie was edited. Even though the director of that movie did stay on through the entire project, he has gone on to say that the studio took his movie and cut it up into a completely unrecognizable version of what he originally intended. The studio even went as far as to hire a company that usually makes trailers to recut the movie, and this is reportedly what led to many of Jared Leto's scenes as Joker getting cut out, among several other plot differences, and led to some thinking that the movie just felt like a big music video instead of a narrative. I myself can see a lot of those different points. Although I did enjoy the Suicide Squad movie to an extent, I think that it could benefit from some work, and I would like to see the director's original take. So time will tell, and I think that if the Justice League experiment goes well, we will probably end up seeing things like that director's cut later on down the line. Whether or not we do might also depend on how well the new Suicide Squad movie is going to do. This movie is not being directed by the original director, but instead they're bringing in the director of Guardians of the Galaxy, James Gunn, to basically do a soft reboot of the property that keeps some of the original cast but introduces a completely new story. It has been reported that Will Smith is not going to return to his role as Deadshot, even though Margot Robbie will reappear as Harley Quinn. Since our last episode, her character has had a movie come out, Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, which got decent reviews but didn't do very well at the box office, and ended up kind of being a reversal of the performance of the first Suicide Squad movie, which made a ton of money in theaters, but critically did not do so well. Sticking for a minute to news within the DC Comics universe, we recently got our first few looks at the Robert Pattinson Batman movie, which as far as we know is not going to be related to any of the Ben Affleck Batman movies, and is also not going to be a new origin story for the character, but rather a look at his early years after already becoming Batman. This could be very interesting. I think it's going to be interesting. I'm not quite sure yet how I feel about the look of the character, and I myself am reserving judgment until they give us a full trailer, but a movie that takes a look at an early Batman kind of coming into his own does sound pretty cool, and the director has promised that the movie will focus more on the detective aspects of the character that haven't really been focused on in many of the other movies. We know we're going to see villains such as Catwoman, the Penguin, and the Riddler in the movie, among others, and with people like Colin Farrell, Zoe Kravitz, Andy Serkis, and Paul Dano attached, the cast is looking pretty interesting so far. Speaking of Batman, there has been exciting news lately as several sources have reported the rumor that Michael Keaton himself may be returning to the role of Bruce Wayne in a movie centered around the Flash exploring alternate universes. If the rumors are true, Keaton could be possibly returning for multiple movies, which would be very exciting for fans, as we might be seeing the beginnings of a Batman Beyond type scenario, or he could potentially be playing an alternate universe version of Bruce Wayne's father, as in the storyline The Flashpoint Paradox. But either way, this rumor is extremely intriguing. Personally, I have wanted to see Michael Keaton return to play an older Bruce Wayne in a movie based on Batman Beyond for a long time, so I hope that they go in that direction if these rumors are true, but as with all the rest of these rumors, time will tell. Also in DC news, we got confirmation recently that Henry Cavill is in talks to return to the role of Superman in several unspecified movies. Despite this, there still does not seem to be any movement forward on a sequel to the first Man of Steel movie that brought him into the role of the character and started the shared universe of the DC films. There have been reports that he will only be appearing in movies that star other characters, so that leaves the question as to what movies those are, and whether that might leave the possibility of a Justice League sequel open, even though Ben Affleck has said that he will not return to the role of the Batman. So we don't currently have a Batman other than Robert Pattinson's standalone movie. Henry Cavill is still Superman, Gal Gadot is still playing Wonder Woman, and Jason Momoa is still playing Aquaman, but the future of the DC Extended Universe does seem a little muddied. Depending on how the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League does on HBO Max, could we see Warner Brothers moving forward on an actual sequel to that Justice League movie? And would it be without Ben Affleck's Batman? We don't know yet. There is also news that J.J. Abrams is going to come in to direct a Superman movie, but the question is, will Henry Cavill be in it? Will it be connected? And will it have anything to do with a new DC universe? All these questions are still up in the air. And while I'm mentioning J.J. Abrams and director's cuts, why don't we jump into the world of Star Wars news? Because there's been a lot of that since our last episode as well. It's been a while since we recorded our last episode, and at the time, Episode 9 had just come out, and The Mandalorian had just finished its first season on Disney+. We ourselves had a ton of fun watching The Mandalorian. Let us know below if you want us to do reviews of that later on down the line. But the fan community really embraced the show, and it did extremely well as far as reviews go. Star Wars Episode 9, however, was much more of a mixed bag. As with Episode 8, some fans really loved it, and other fans really hated it. And while I don't think it was as polarizing as Rian Johnson's Episode 8, I personally do feel like it did suffer a bit from the lack of direction that came from the disjointed plan Disney seems to have had with the Star Wars sequels. It kind of felt like J.J. Abrams took what he might have had in mind for both Episodes 8 and 9 and tried to combine it into one movie, and it ended up feeling a bit rushed, and a lot of aspects of it didn't seem like they had an adequate explanation behind them. One piece of news that has come out recently about Episode 9 is that J.J. Abrams originally had a much longer cut of the movie that did not get seen in theaters. Like Justice League and Suicide Squad, he has said that the version of Episode 9 that we got was not exactly what he had in mind originally for the film, and that the studio made several changes before the film got to theaters. It is even reported that they were changing things almost right up until the release of the film, and his original cut of the movie might have been over a half an hour longer than what we actually got. This might explain why the movie does feel very rushed in some places, and without going into many spoilers here for those of you who have yet to see it, the ending was supposedly much more significant to the series overall than what we ended up getting. If you want to know more details about that, we will be releasing a video talking about it that is more spoiler heavy very soon. But as far as what's relevant to what I've just been talking about, it'll be very interesting to see if we do end up getting a J.J. Abrams director's cut of that movie later on down the line. I personally hope we do, because I'm very interested to see what he actually had in mind for the movie, and whether the fan opinion would have found it any better than what we ended up getting. I personally do not hate the movie, but I do think that there are some things that work and some things that definitely don't work for me about it. And as far as being the finale to over 40 years worth of movies, I feel like there were a couple things that just felt like they were lacking. What is also interesting about this, if you didn't already know, was that J.J. Abrams was not originally planned to come back to write or direct the final Star Wars movie. Originally, it was going to be written and directed by Colin Trevorrow, who is the director of both Jurassic World and its sequel Fallen Kingdom. And since our last episode, his original unused script for Star Wars Episode 9 has leaked online. Several other sources have already talked about this, and we're going to go in depth on it later, but Trevorrow's script was going to be a completely different story than what we actually ended up getting. Not only does this prove the theory that Disney did not have any sort of plan set in stone from the beginning, but it's provided a fascinating look into an alternate Star Wars ending that might have been, but now we're only going to see in the form of writing and some unused concept art. That is really cool, by the way. Now, it's hard to say for sure whether this script would have gone over better or worse with the fans than what we actually got, but I, for one, really love some parts of it. There are some parts, like the Episode 9 that we got, that don't work so well, but there are others that I'm really disappointed that we didn't get to see, such as a return to the planet Coruscant from the prequels, which is now under the control of the First Order. The script also had nothing to do with the return of the Emperor, and brought in references to the planet Mortis, which was seen in the Clone Wars TV show, as well as a completely different final scene that I, for one, think works a lot better than what we actually got. As I said, we will make our own video discussing this script more in depth later on, but for now you can enjoy taking a look at some of these unused pieces of concept art that highlight what was really a very different movie than what we ended up getting. The movie had a very expanded role for the Rose Tico character, who ended up only getting a few minutes of screen time in the actual movie, featured the use of a Sith holocron, which is something I personally would have loved seeing, and featured a fight between Kylo Ren and a spectral Darth Vader, which is very much like the vision of Darth Vader we see Luke having on Dagobah in The Empire Strikes Back. This version of Star Wars Episode 9 was going to be titled Duel of the Fates, which is a reference to the music that's playing in the fight at the end of Star Wars Episode 1. And it's fine if you disagree with me, but I think that that's a much better title than The Rise of Skywalker. In any case, unfortunately, even if Colin Trevorrow had not left the project, this script would have always been fated to change, because the version of it that I described was submitted to the studio merely days before the unfortunate passing of Carrie Fisher. As Harrison Ford's Han Solo was given a spotlight in Star Wars Episode 7, and Episode 8 heavily focused on Mark Hamill's character of Luke, this Episode 9 was heavily going to focus on Carrie Fisher's character of Leia, but with her passing, that was something that would have had to be changed either way. This real-life tragedy did have a ripple effect on the fictional universe, and as things ended up happening, the studio did the best they could to honor her legacy and keep the character in the movie without recasting the role or using CGI. All this about Episode 9 amounts to what I would call the unfortunate side of the Star Wars news we've had lately, but there's also been a lot of exciting Star Wars news since our last episode. First off, the revival of the Clone Wars animated series finished airing on Disney+, and that gave fans a proper ending to a show that was canceled several years ago, something fans thought that they'd never get to see. This series originally had 5 seasons on television, but they had plans for 2 more seasons that never aired. Some episodes did end up airing years later on Netflix, but others were left completely unfinished or never even begun. The 12 episodes that we ended up getting on Disney Plus do not represent every episode of Clone Wars that didn't get to be made, but it did help the show to finish bridging the gap between Star Wars Episode 2 and Episode 3, and particularly during the 4-part finale gave some awesome new moments to the Star Wars canon that helped complete that missing piece of the current Star Wars timeline. It also helped fans of Star Wars animation figure out where the character of Ahsoka Tano went between her last official episode of the Clone Wars and her first appearance in the show Star Wars Rebels. Speaking of her character, some other exciting Star Wars news has to do with the rumor that she might also appear in live action for the first time in the next season of The Mandalorian. It has been announced by several sources that Rosario Dawson will be appearing as the character, although Disney themselves has yet to confirm this. Rumors surrounding Season 2 of that show say that not only could Ahsoka show up, but we could also see fan-favorite characters such as Boba Fett and Bo-Katan. The latter being another character that was introduced in the Clone Wars TV show and we saw again in Star Wars Rebels. There are also rumors that Ahsoka could receive her own live-action spin-off should her appearance in The Mandalorian prove successful. There are also heavy rumors that remain unconfirmed that Star Wars Rebels might receive a sequel series that would also be animation. In slightly less exciting Star Wars news, the Obi-Wan Kenobi series that was originally a movie but will now see a release on Disney Plus has been pushed back yet again. As things stand, they're saying that we probably won't see this series come out until at least 2022, but as long as Ewan McGregor remains attached as Obi-Wan, then I personally don't have much of a problem with waiting, if it means that the series overall will end up being better for it. Some other recent news in the Star Wars world includes the announcement of what they're calling the Star Wars High Republic Initiative, which will be a series of stories told over books, comics, and other media that all relate back to an era that takes place hundreds of years before the films themselves. This is said to be a little bit different than the stories of the Old Republic that we've seen in certain graphic novels, books, and video games already, but we'll see the Jedi at their height about 300 or 400 years before the movies, and while it's still unclear whether we're going to see any film or television projects based around this era in the Star Wars universe, it seems highly likely. If they are establishing this era as something that is story-worthy, expect to see films or Disney Plus series about it show up at some point or another. Completely unrelated to this, but also very interesting to hear, is the fact that Taika Waititi, who directed Thor Ragnarok, What We Do in the Shadows, and the finale episode of Mandalorian Season 1, is going to be directing his own feature-length Star Wars movie. It has not been announced yet what kind of movie it's going to be or where in the Star Wars universe it's going to take place, but based on his previous body of work, this is very exciting and definitely something to look forward to. There is also the series that is confirmed to be coming out that centers around the character of Cassian Andor from Rogue One before the events of that movie. And while there is no indication as of yet that it is actually going to happen, there is a vocal fan community online that is pushing for the continuation of the Han Solo story that began in that character's spin-off movie. The movie itself did not do very well in theaters, but I myself think that it's actually a pretty underrated film that ended up getting a bad rap and a bad release date after a very troubled production. It might not have been the most mind-blowing Star Wars movie that's ever been released, but it was clearly intended to be the start of something bigger, and it would be interesting to see those actors get another chance to further that story. Whether that ends up happening or not is just something that we'll have to wait and see. We probably would have heard some more news about some of these rumors and upcoming projects at this year's Star Wars Celebration, which, if you don't know, is the fan convention that has been running since 1999. But unfortunately, as with events like Comic-Con and the E3 Gaming Expo, it has become another victim of the coronavirus, as it was recently announced that the event has been cancelled for this year and will not return until 2022. Any large reveals for the Star Wars universe that don't take place online will probably now take place at Disney's next D23 Expo, which is slated to happen next year. Disney themselves are not really hurting, as the launch of Disney Plus has proven massively successful for them, especially at this time. But as I said earlier, the release schedule for some of their giant blockbuster films has been massively affected by the COVID situation. As longtime fans of the Marvel Cinematic Universe know, each movie of that franchise has become more and more interconnected as time has gone on, and each new installment in the franchise helps to set up what's coming next, as they introduce new characters or have interesting post-credit sequences that hint at the next movie. Last year, Marvel even doubled down on this concept when they previewed their Phase 4, announcing that it would not only include several more movies over the next couple years, but that they would also incorporate several miniseries that would debut on the Disney Plus service, and that these would share actors and interconnect with the movies themselves on a level that we have not seen previously. This lineup includes streaming miniseries for Falcon and Winter Soldier, Scarlet Witch, Loki, Hawkeye, and several other characters, intertwined with movies for Black Widow, characters known as the Eternals, Shang-Chi, Doctor Strange, Thor, and eventually characters like the Fantastic Four and the X-Men that Marvel and Disney now have full control over again since Disney purchased 20th Century Fox. This is a massively interconnected lineup of movies, as the MCU concept is still something that is unprecedented and unmatched in the world of film, and so moving the release date of one movie does have a domino effect on not only the films but now the TV series as well. This begins with how the Black Widow movie was supposed to be released in May, but is now being released in November, and production on the show for Falcon and Winter Soldier was shut down temporarily. All the release dates for the shows for Disney Plus are likely to change, and the release date for the next theatrical movie, Marvel's Eternals, which is about characters related to everybody's favorite bad guy Thanos, has moved from this November to next February. That date in February was originally supposed to see the debut of the first movie for the Chinese superhero Shang-Chi, but that will now be released in May, which pushes the release of the Doctor Strange sequel, which in turn pushes the release of the next Thor movie, and so on and so forth. So far, production has not been affected for films that are debuting later out, like the sequels to Black Panther and Captain Marvel, But if the world does happen to go through another wave of the coronavirus, who knows what could happen? In the coming weeks, we are going to start to see businesses such as theaters opening back up again, though in general, and even beyond the world of movies, if we do want to enjoy our lives and have a chance to enjoy all this entertainment, we do have to remember to continue being smart and playing things safe, and to follow all the precautions and guidelines that we can to help prevent the further spread of this disease. As far as we here at Cineforce go, our goal is to continue to try and bring you more new content, and while we acknowledge that there are a lot of stressful and terrible things going on in the world right now, we hope that future content on our channel can continue to be lighthearted and positive in the face of all that, and help at least some of you out by being another outlet of entertainment to get you through the day. As far as our plans go, barring any further catastrophes, we do plan to bring you shorter, more frequent episodes of this show focused on film and TV news, and our restaurant takeout review show called Couples Car Eating should be debuting very soon. As I stated earlier, we will be starting a series we call the Alterverse very soon, which will explore alternate universe concepts of series like Star Wars. And if any movie lovers out there are in the mood for a bunch of foul language and New England stereotypes, check back soon for the first of our Boston movie breakdowns, which we should put up on the channel later in the week. While we are currently working with limited resources, we do hope to bring you all this content and more as soon as we can. So bear with us, and if you've liked what you heard today, please hit like and subscribe, and leave us a comment down below on something you'd like to hear us talk about in future episodes. If you have any questions or input on any of these ideas, go ahead and send us an email, and we do hope that you continue checking back for everything we've got lined up in the future. If you've been here for the whole video, thank you for listening, thanks for hanging out, and we hope you join us next time.